All right. Today on the podcast, we have Mike Giovanni. We've done some great talks. We talked at IT Nation last year. Probably the best talk of the whole conference, I'm certain.
I'd agree.
It was great. We were like, oh man, we're like the last talk before the beer run on Friday. Who the heck is going to come to this? And we had a pretty full room. I'm like, all right. And Mike rocked it. We did a great talk on risk management and using SWOT exercises.
Yeah. We came to the conclusion that the biggest risk to IT Nation Secure or Connect was the lack of free beer.
Yeah. So free beer on the buses, I think, was the number one recommendation, like on the shuttles. So I think what we're doing here is we're doing a series in 2024 on featuring MSPs. So Mike is with Netwerks. And he has been running an MSP for a while. So I'd love to talk about his MSP a little bit here, what his predictions are for 2024, what's going on in the MSP world, what are some of the changes we're seeing, as well as how can we adapt to them. So Mike, go ahead and give us a breakdown of your MSP, who you target, as well as what you're seeing happen in end of we were talking about 2023 and into 2024 before we started here. So
yeah, we were.
Give us a refresher.
Yeah, so Network Strategic Services, we've been around for quite a while. I started the company in 1988, so I've been a long time, but I've always been really a boutique organization. So we really focused on small group of clients. A lot of our clients, go back 20, some 30 years. And as a result of that, it's an interesting thing. You got this dichotomy of some newer clients, some older clients. And, as we were talking, Adam, 2023 was a tough year for us because we lost a handful of clients that we had for, decades. And a lot of it was either, retirements, closing businesses. Some of them were still reeling from COVID and having challenges with that. Some did, were in a merger acquisition system. So we ended up losing a big chunk of MRR over the course of 23. And we're getting a little nervous there by the end of the year. And then all of a sudden it's like the floodgates open and
that economy picks up. Everybody feels it.
Now, here's what I can tell you. And for the people who are viewing, if you are not using Humanize IT as a platform for your QBRs, your TBRs, you need to be, because we found that at the end of the year last year, we got everybody on board with our QBRs. We were jacked between, I'd say, mid-October to the end of November, and we came out of it just smelling good. We had not only brought a lot of those fringe break fix clients onto managed services, but we basically rebuilt our MRR and almost doubled back where we were. So that was really good. And, now we're looking at 2024 and saying, all right, what's this going to do for us? And what we're seeing is there are so many areas that right now are going to be getting hit with the necessity to find a compliance standard at their doorstep. And, it started with the defense industrial base, CMMC. It's a big thing. That rule is finally coming out. It's being finalized by the end of this year. Everybody who wants to play in the defense industrial base is going to have to be compliant. And now also managed service providers that want to play in that space will also have to be compliant. So there's a lot of impetus for change. FTC safeguards, they're continuously refining that. They've been making changes since it came out, or the big change came out in June of last year. They're still making tweaks. HIPAA is going to be changing. PCI is a big change right now. And if you do anything with payment cards, the old PCI DSS 3.2 standards are completely gone by March 2025. And that new DSS standard, PCI DSS standard 4.0, has a lot of cybersecurity built into it. So if you're not protecting your network, then you're out of compliance. And if you have a card breach or you have cardholder data is leaked, you own it. And that is going to get really expensive.
And I've been seeing you push pretty hard on LinkedIn on a lot of these security breaches, trying to raise awareness for your clients.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's fantastic, keeping it in front of them. So like as a client of your MSP, you should be following the page. Like follow Mike's page just so you can see a little bit of what's relevant out there. And it's good stuff. As somebody who used to be a CISO, director of security, CISSP, like Mike does a great job of being an advocate for clients. Like, hey, here's things that you need to be worried about, not just because he's trying to sell you security. He's actually like, this is genuinely what you should be worried about in your business, and have a conversation rather than a one size fits all solution. Customize that security and that do a risk analysis. That's what your compliance is for. Do a risk analysis, measure yourself against a set of standards, and see where you stand, and let your MSP help you.
Yeah. And that's a good point, Adam. But here's the thing. Risk assessments, they're not created equal.
Nope.
So you're going to find, and again, if you're watching this podcast, you're an MSP, there are a lot of tools out there that will give you an assessment of sorts. But here's the truth. Most of those are what I would call FUD heavy, fear, uncertainty, and doubt heavy. Yep. They're trying to scare the client into making a decision towards cybersecurity. Well, here's the truth. Risk goes far beyond what that assessment is going to give you. And if you're not sitting down having a conversation with your client, if you're not having a conversation with your MSP, and they're not focusing on all of the little pieces that are going to impact their business, if you're not talking about business problems, then you're missing the boat of a risk assessment, because it goes so much further than just a level 1 penetration test or a rapid fire tool scan or something along those lines. Yeah, they'll give you some good, meaningful data, but unless you sit and talk out the problems, if you don't do that SWOT session, if you don't come to understand what is the nature of that business, how are they going to be impacted, and what is at stake, then you haven't done your job yet. You've got work to do.
I tell people, like, as a good cheat sheet, if you're a small business, you just want to know agnostically, something called the SANS Top 20. It's one of my favorite things here. And you can see that the number one thing isn't a pen test. The number one thing year over year, I'm Googling it right now. Inventory. Why inventory? Because you need to know what you have and where your risks are. Before you get to continuous vulnerability scanning, you need to have an inventory of all of these things, and you need to identify it, and then you can secure on your computers what's going on before you get to continuous vulnerabilities. And now a lot of technology firms will try to sell you continuous vulnerability because of the FUD. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Oh yeah, we can show you. And plus, they're going to charge you for that. It does not cost anything to do inventory. No one's going to tell you, hey, we need to do an inventory. Like, no, you should start there and then talk with like a Mike and say, okay, our biggest source of revenue at our company is these contracts we do for schools. We build new schools. We help them with their renovation of classrooms. And we store all of those documents on this server for all of our architecture designs. We have a CAD server we're using. Okay, so that server is a high risk asset on your network. Now you talk to Mike's like, what would happen if that server caught on fire today? How long would we be down? And then can your company sustain that? Okay, how do we get around that? Mike says, well, here's what I can do for you. And he can give you multiple options. And now you've got a way to mitigate risk. And there's some great options that are really expensive, and there are great options that are free. Sure. And you can see both, but that's how you start. A lot of companies will try to scare you into buying something really fast. A good company will say, let's talk first, and then let's decide what to do based upon your needs.
Yeah, I was just in a conversation. I had two great conversations yesterday. One with a group of peer MSPs. And one of the things that we really talked about in that was, looking at the overall scope of what a company's risk is going to be. And one of the things that we were talking about is, if we limit our focus on purely the technological, the IT pieces, you would think that, for managed service providers, that's what we should be doing. Well, that's wrong, because if you're not taking into account the other things that are going to impact that business and bring them to their attention. So one of the things we focused on was supply chain.
Yep.
And while supply chain can be a great risk, a huge risk, especially.
We felt that during COVID.
Oh, we sure did. Yeah. So, but you can look at supply chain from the perspective of, a supply chain breach that trickles down. So like the big Kaseya breach from a couple of years ago, where, they got breached, it got down to some of their MSPs got breached, and their end clients got breached. So it was a fan out of thousands of endpoints. Not a good time. Not a good time for anybody. But you also have to look at what is the other impact of a supply chain. If they're a manufacturer and they can't get that one tiny little screw to build their widget, that means they can't fulfill their orders. So what do they do then? Do they have a backup plan? Have they taken the time to analyze, how do I function if I can't get what I need to make it rain? If they're making a product that is instrumental. Imagine if, when the height of COVID was hitting and they needed respirators and they couldn't get the parts to make those respirators. That's a lot of people dying.
Yep.
So when you look at that, risk goes so far beyond just the IT piece. And a good VCIO, VCISO is going to sit down and have that conversation with you. And so, I strongly emphasize that. Now, another piece, when you're looking at some of the changes to compliance, what is that going to hit? What is that going to impact? And how is it going to, make a difference in your world? Well, let's see. If you're a medical practice and you take payment cards for your copays, well, now you fall under PCI DSS compliance. Let's not even talk about HIPAA. I have an interesting life expectancy for HIPAA. It's just so many doctors just say, "Oh no, that's an evil. They're never gonna come and audit me." Well, that's changing.
Yeah.
Get your big boy pants on, pull them up tight, because that's changing. You look at that in how many medical practices actually follow PCI compliance. I haven't found one yet that really met PCI compliance. And because the stakes are being raised with this change, it means that their cybersecurity practices are going to have to change with it. And if they don't change and there's a card holder data breach, it's going to cost them more. It could make it to the point where they can't take those payment cards anymore.
Yeah. And also we're seeing a lot more legal liability being passed on to whoever's in your CISO role. So if you don't have a CISO role at your organization and you're in breach, there's a very real chance that you might end up on the podium and on the stand.
That's it.
And, I wanted to go back to something you were saying earlier, is that risk goes much larger than technology. And one of the biggest mistakes I see MSPs make is this DR is one piece. Disaster recovery is a small, tiny piece of a larger thing called a business continuity plan.
Yeah.
And the BCP is where you need to fit DR into. It doesn't matter if you have a firewall failover. That's disaster recovery. That's just a piece of a huge thing. When you're talking about business continuity planning, you're talking about, hey, when there is a snowstorm, who calls who to make sure they're okay, and if they're going to be able to work, or if they need to cover critical infrastructure or whatever it is that this snowstorm is affecting. If you want to see somebody with good BCP, look at a hospital. Look at an electrical utility. Yeah. They have amazing BCP because they're okay, down to who is affected, whose families are affected, so we can keep their peace of mind in place. And you are talking about firewalls and backups as a small piece of this huge risk process this corporation is undergoing. And so But the thing is, a lot of MSPs haven't had to do a BCP. And so they don't see that there's a larger picture here. They see disaster recovery as the only thing you have to do to keep your business safe. So no. It's so much bigger.
And so that's an interesting point there. That you're on the right track with this, Adam. There's a big misconception here. If you've ever written any kind of policy, and I know you have, in your time as a CISO, yeah. So, and I've spent when COVID hit, I actually, we were just a general practice MSP. We did that. And we always focused on security because that's my background. I'm an ex-military wonk, and I worked in cybersecurity back before it was called that. I was a crypto weenie. I worked on the stuff that sent and received
tactical mathematics.
Exactly. Yeah. That was my gig.
Applied math.
Yeah. Applied. It was definitely applied. But when you're looking at that, if you're talking about policy, you have to understand that there's a huge difference between disaster recovery and business continuity. Disaster recovery is what you do after the right of boom. Okay. Yep. That's you're picking up the pieces. You're pulling out the server out from the pile of rubble. That's disaster recovery. Business continuity is completely different. That is what you're doing to stay functioning within the mess.
Yep.
So how do you keep running your business when the lights are out?
Yeah. And that's where I want people to focus. Like, your piece of the puzzle here, when you're thinking about compliance, which compliance family do you want to use is part of your BCP? Which one's going to help you support your business the best? And so this year, as Mike's calling it out, like, compliance is going to be a big deal this year. It's going to be a good moneymaker for MSPs, but only if you understand how it's really affecting your clients. And each client is different. They each have something different to care about. That's where you need to do that architecture assessment and say, what do they have and why do they have it? So that I can determine which ones to focus on. So that CAD server may be the number one priority in their entire organization. Because if you burn the laptops, if everything else goes haywire, but that CAD server is up, they still make money. Okay, right. That CAD server is great because it's where their designs are. But then next to it is the dynamic server or the QuickBooks server that they bill with. Okay, that's a huge one. Okay, now we need to think about what compliance do we want to apply to that? How do we want to make sure that's okay? And what if you can't come into the office? Is there a way to remote in? Is there a way to keep doing business? And you helping them with that is where they're going to feel better. And then you can start with compliance and risk mitigation, risk transference, and a whole bunch of things. You can work with like Tim Golden's compliance scorecard on that. Hopefully one of your MSPs using that, or some kind of third party to help you understand risk mitigation, so that when a breach happens, you can say, we did our due diligence. We tried really hard to avoid this, and no one can fault you. But if you have willful negligence, as if you're a small business, medium business out there, and you're found to have willful negligence and it affects your clients, you're going to be in for a world of hurt. And we have seen companies go under overnight because of this. This is the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right?
Yeah. Well,
but it's going to get more serious here over the next year.
So to speak into that,
much to identify.
Yeah, to speak into that, Adam, as I said, HIPAA is changing, and one of the changes is in that willful negligence category. So prior to this change, willful negligence would net you about a $17,000 per record fine.